Hi, I'm Rod Gilley. Welcome to episode 2 of Relax and Chat. Our guest today, all the way from London, England, is Kimberley Shead, writer of gritty crime fiction. So, grab your favorite drink, kick back and relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, Kimberley. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, thank you, Rod. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you today.
That's really sweet. Well, I think we'll jump right into the questions. The first question is, do you consider yourself to be a pantser or a plotter, and why?
Yeah, this I found quite difficult. I had to really give it some thought. Because I've written 3 books and published them, but I've found that with each one, I've worked extremely differently. The first one, it was just a shambles. It was throw everything onto the page, and keep editing it. And that book actually took me a number of years to write, in between working and having children, etc. But when I actually finished it and unscrambled the mess, I found the story that I was looking for in there. So that one, I would say I definitely pantsed to the nth degree. And because I'm writing crime, and it's quite gritty and dark, and there's an awful lot of subplots, and I like to write a couple of villains, not just the one villain. I do find that when I'm pantsing, I'll get to a stage now where I have to stop and plot ahead a bit before I start writing again. And also another thing that I've realised thinking on the question is that an awful lot of plotting I do actually in my head. So I think, my husband will say to me, "What have you been doing?" And I say, I've been writing. "Well, you haven't." And I'll say, "No, but I am writing in my head," because I find that I have to think things through. I think it's just the process of getting things down. But I like to be ahead of it in my head. So I would say that I'm a mixture, and that I've changed with each novel I've written. So it's a step-by-step process. But yeah, first of all, definitely I pants everything. But now I do bullet point plots, really, as I get further into the book. Yeah, so that's my process.
Yeah, I'm a pantser myself, and I will admit my first writing project is a novel, and I pantsed it all the way through from one paragraph to the next, and the rewrite and editing has been a nightmare. I just really created a mess. So I can certainly relate to what you said. I mean, Okay, the second question that we'll talk about, and this is probably interesting to a lot of people. How do you balance your day-to-day responsibilities with the demands of writing? Because it takes quite a bit to plot out your story, to actually do the typing. There's a lot of time involved. So how do you balance your responsibilities of your day-to-day life with your writing?
Yeah, I found this really difficult to begin with, because when I first started writing, my family were very young. And I was working as well. I'd come home and be exhausted, like people are in general. So I'd find little periods of time when I'd sit and write. And I think that's why that book took me so long. And actually, I self-published the first book, The Voyeur, in 2019. But I started writing it when my daughter was 7. And to put things in perspective, she's 35 now.
Oh my.
So, from that very first chapter of this detective sergeant speaking to me that he had this story to tell, it took all of those years, because I had quite quite a time-consuming job in education, and so I found that I came home and I was quite brain dead from that. And then I had all the children, because I have 6 children. So I had them. Obviously, you can't ignore your children or your husband. So finding time to fit it in then was quite difficult. But I've retired now. So actually, I say I have more time, but I look after my grandchildren. So a lot of time is taken up with that, and also living life, because, you know, I've come to the conclusion that without living life, you've got nothing to write down anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not someone who writes every single day. Writing now is much more of a joy than something that I'm trying to fit in. And I don't really think my mum works that way anyway, scheduling and sitting down. I tend to beat myself up if I can't do it. So this way, if I sit down to write, I'm writing because I want to write. I've got something to say, and I tend to write an awful lot more that way. So juggling, I think, is difficult no matter what season of your life you're in. But I do think that, you know, you have to work to your own strengths. You have to find out what works best for you. And some people work really well to a structure, and other people find that they work well if they work to, I'm going to do a certain amount of words a week. Or it might be, you know, I'm going to sit down and write for 2 hours on this particular day. I think that's what I've learned about writing. That's the major thing that I've learned about writing, is don't listen too much to what other people do. Yeah. Try these things. If they sound like, you know, oh, well, I quite like the idea of doing that, try them. But if they don't work for you, it's not your issue. It's just that there's another way that will work for you better. And it's about experimenting and finding out what fits with you. And you might get to a certain period in your life where that doesn't fit anymore, and you look at another way of doing things. But I think it's all about being as adaptable as you can and flexible as you can with your writing, and, you know, feeling good about what you do, what you complete. And not kind of thinking, oh, I was going to do this amount today. Think, oh, wow, yeah, I've got that done, you know. I think all that kind of thing helps.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially with the what works for you.
Yes.
With critique partners and beta readers, I've occasionally had some that didn't understand that a suggestion is something to be considered and decided by the writer. Some get their feelings hurt if you don't use their suggestions. And, well, you've got to do what is right for you. I totally agree with that statement in whatever subject. When you're trying to write, you got to follow your heart. Which of your stories, out of any story you've ever written, short story, book, anything, which was your favorite story you ever wrote, and why?
Well, I do tend to be one of these people that loves the book they're writing or the story they're writing at that particular moment. And so I would say probably what I'm writing now, which is the 4th book in the series, Whisper of Death, it actually is something that I'm writing because I read a quote somewhere and I don't know who it was from, so I can't tell you that. But about writing things that you fear, writing what you fear the most. So a lot of the crime I write are things that actually fascinate me because I'm scared of them. And this book is no different. So in some ways, I suppose I get dragged into that. But I think if I was to look at everything, probably The Voyeur the first book, would be my favourite, simply because it took so long to write, and it was such an amazing feeling when I pressed that button to publish, you know, and it, you know, it was something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to write a book, and because technology is as it is now, you know, we've got that privilege. We can do that. We can actually publish our books. We're not relying on people saying, oh, you know, well, that's a book that people are going to read at the moment. Our readers can actually say whether they want to read it or not. Yeah. So I think that because the voyeur scopes so much of my life, from probably my late 20s to like 40s, 50s, you know, it's probably the one that I would have to say is my favourite. It's got the most passion in it and the most emotion, and it's probably the one that hasn't got the structure so much, but I feel it's a good story. And perhaps if I sat down and rewrote it using the techniques that I know now, it might be even better, but I don't believe in going back. I believe in going forward and learning. So, but yes, I'd say the voyeur would be the favourite, although I am deep in the new book I'm writing now and really enjoying it. Cool. So, yes.
Yeah. I think that's why I'm a pantser. It's such a ball to see where the story ends up. You know, it is. And I got to say, I'm going to have to run out and buy a copy of your book, because I like the idea of a crime story that has a bit of Lovecraft sprinkled into it. You know, that sounds really cool. All right. So the next question that we have, and this one's pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Of all your stories, what was the hardest scene that you ever wrote? It was really difficult to write that scene.
Yeah, this kind of comes back again to the pantsing and the fact that when you're writing crime, you're going to, like I've said, I have one main villain, and whether it's the murderer, kidnapper, whatever. But I do have other individuals that in their own way are committing crimes, and they might not be as awful as the main crime, but there are the crimes being committed. And I find in any of the books I write, where I write from the villain's point of view, I find it absolutely draining, especially pantsing, because I know that I get into the character's mind as much as possible. I've found out, actually, this is quite interesting. I found out that I've got a fantasia, which is where you can't actually visualize anything. You know, when writers say, oh, yeah, I write it, I can see it playing out in my head, I can picture it, or I can picture the character. I can't do that. I can't see anything. So if you said to me, you know, can you see a red apple? I wouldn't be able to see it. I'd be able to tell you what it looked like because I've seen one before, but I can't actually visualize it. So, which was quite a shock for me, because I thought, well, how am I actually writing some of these scenes then, you know, or writing, because something that I get a lot of feedback on is my description, and that people feel they're there because of the description. And I think, well, if I can't really see it in my head, how am I doing that? But then after a lot of thought, I thought to myself, I know how I'm doing it, because I play on the emotions more of the characters. So rather than seeing them, I'm feeling them. So I know it sounds strange, but you might understand it if you read one of my books. But so when I'm writing a villain, the emotions that they're going through, I'm really feeling that as I'm writing it. I'm not actually seeing them going through those steps, but I'm in their position. And I'm all constantly thinking, well, how would they feel now? You know, what would make them behave in that way? What, you know, what's their next step going to be? And that kind of thing. And I find that by the end of a chapter that I've written via the villain's point of view, I tend to have to palette cleanse. So I'll write something else completely different. I'll write some romance, or I'll write some paranormal romance or contemporary romance, just something light and fuzzy to take me out of the darkness, because I find that if I don't, I find it very difficult to come from that chapter and carry on knowing what the victim's going to go through next. So I would say that out of anything I write, the villain's point of view I find extremely hard, and not hard to write, but emotionally difficult, and it's very draining for me.
Oh,
yes.
Well, actually, it's fascinating that you write your books from the point of emotion. As a reader, I love a book that moves me emotionally, whether that be frightening me or making me sad or making me laugh. I like that it comes from the emotion. You know, I do have a kind of a visual mind. I can like play a book like it's a movie in my head. But if there's no emotion there, the book's really usually not very good. So it sounds really awesome, you know, that your books are actually based in emotion. That's very cool. And the last question of our standard questions is, which scene that you've written was the most fun to write, and why?
This is where I think you'll like this, because this is where pantsing really comes in. Where I write crime, when I'm writing the book, I tend to have at least 4, 5 people that could actually be the criminal, and I don't know who they are. So what I tend to do is, as I get to the end of the book, I will write out a few chapters from each of their points of view. If they did it, you know, what were their reasons? What, you know, why did they actually commit that crime? How does it connect to the rest of the story? Is it something that readers are going to believe? Is it a bit out there? So I tend to have 5 different endings with different criminals that it could have been. And I don't take the one that's obvious, but I don't take the ones that are out there. I look at the ones in the middle and choose one of those and write that into the story. And I have so much fun with that, because I really enjoy thinking about the different characters I've had in the book, why they would, you know, why on earth would they behave in any particular way? Is it feasible? And it's just so much fun. And I know that people have commented on the end of The Voyeur because they didn't see it coming, because it was just a twist that came. You know, it wasn't so much the person, it was how they behaved at the end. That was something that people didn't see coming. But so the endings I enjoy writing, and I probably give them more time than any other part of the book. And because where a lot of the writing is pantsing, I've got no idea until the end anyway. So it's Zip Dip Sky Blue, really. And just write chapter for each of them and think, oh yes, now that, you know, that will fit. And I don't think I'd expect that at the end of the book. And so that's how I write the endings, and they're so much fun to write.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, so I thought it would be fun if you could maybe tell us a little bit about Voyeur or any of your books that you would like to talk about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've got the paperbacks here of the 3 in the series. So The Voyeur, that's the first one. They're all based, and then there's Isla's Game, and then there's Severed Lifeline. They're all with the same detective inspector, who is Detective Inspector Albie Edwards, and he's based at a London police station, and they all concern him and his team. Now, the books, they can be read individually because they're all separate crimes.
Mhm.
However, his life continues throughout them. So if you want to know what happens to him, then it's best to read them in order. But if you're just reading for the crime, then you can read them individually. You can go from anyone you want to. And they're all, like I say, they're all set in London. A lot of the action takes place on a massive council estate, which is based on a real council estate that I knew when I was growing up. But it's a different name, and it's not there. It's not there anymore. The council estate I based it on, it's been knocked down. But there's a lot of places in here that I write about that are here, and it's this one was a labour of love, and this one, Isla's Game, is about kidnapping. To begin with, and I was very obsessed with the fact that so many people think that evil people or killers they'd know them if they saw them. They're going to know somehow, because beautiful people wouldn't do things like that.
Oh.
And also, I was quite keen to write about a crime where a woman actually took the lead in crimes, so and a beautiful woman. So this is quite a complex story. This one is a lot of this is about Albie's uncle who brought him up, who was the chief of police, and he's now retired, and he has to come back to London to help solve a case. So he's very much involved in this one. And all of them have more than one crime going on in them and are quite complex. So, yes, really enjoyed writing them. And I hope that anyone who has seen them and wants to try them will enjoy them.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been such a very enjoyable chat. I sure hope you'll do the show again sometime.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to.
Just to be clear to the audience, each of those books can be read as a standalone book, or if you really enjoy them, you would read each one in sequence. That's
right.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Again, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed your company this evening. Really a very pleasant, happy surprise. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak on here. I've really enjoyed it. And, you know, I hope that we can get together again at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
And to the audience, particularly any writer out there, if you'd like to be on the show, see the last slide in this video.